Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about masturbation in men. It's a long pending topic, and I have with me Dr. Eric Sprankle, who is an associate professor in psychology, and he's heading the sexuality studies department at Minnesota State University. I'll add him right away so that we can start with the discussion. Dr. Sprankle, yes, I can see you. I will be disabling comments so that we can see doctors clearly, okay?
Hello.
Hello, doctor.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Thank you for accepting to do an Instagram live with me, and this is your first IG live, right?
This is, yeah. So I was worried about the technical stuff that, yeah, it was just going to be a mess on my end, but it seems to be working okay.
Okay. So I'm Swati. Maya is my daughter, though people call me Maya. I can call you Dr. Sprankle during the
Yeah,
session?
sure.
Okay. So I'm really new to the field of sexuality health. I've been a lactation consultant for 5 to 6 years, and it's been around 2.5 to 3 years since I'm dealing with sex ed classes for parents, and that's how I've been slowly getting introduced to sexuality issues in adults as well. A lot of men have been DMing me about no FAP and should they masturbate? Is masturbation healthy? All of that. And I shared a lot of questions with you as well. So I'll ask you questions one by one and you just answer me. Meanwhile, I'm a big fan. I've been following your work for the past 1 year and I've been sharing all your witty tweets, right? Onto my IG feed as well. And pictures of your cats and all that I've been seeing for a year. So this is a fan moment for me as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So doctor, first question. What happens during masturbation in men? When a man masturbates or when a person with a penis masturbates, what exactly happens?
Yeah, so I'll get really specific and technical with this answer. So just bear with me, and I think I'll lay some good context for the rest of this conversation. So what happens with any type of direct penile stimulation? That's going to create a neurochemical process that essentially dilates the blood vessels in the penis that allows the influx of blood that creates the erection. With prolonged penile stimulation and prolonged arousal and erection, that's actually going to trigger a spinal cord reflex. And so at this point, the brain's not even all that necessary for communication down the spinal cord. It's actually the lower part of the spinal cord that will trigger the orgasmic response. And that's just a series of muscular contractions that we sense and perceive as pleasurable. And that's the orgasmic sensation. So that is separate from the ejaculation process. Typically, they happen at the same time, so we think it's one thing, but they are actually two separate processes, and that's important to know that an orgasm is separate from ejaculation. Now, with ejaculation, mature sperm cells, which are stored in the epididymis, that's a little structure attached to the testicles. Nothing's actually getting ejaculated from the testicles themselves. The testicles just make sperm. They're stored in the epididymis. And so during ejaculation, the mature sperm cells from the epididymis get released up through the vas deferens. And then they're joined with fluid from the prostate gland and the adjoining seminal vesicles. And that fluid then is expelled from the urethra and outside of the penis. And so the second point of that is that sperm is separate from the seminal fluid. And so if you have a vasectomy, you're still going to ejaculate fluid, probably the same amount. You won't notice any amount difference, but you're just not ejaculating the sperm cells anymore. And then the third point with all that is that this mechanism, both ejaculation and orgasm, are identical regardless of the type of stimulation. So it could be through masturbation where the stimulation is provided by your hand, or it could be from a partner's hand. It could be from a vagina, a mouth, an anus, a pillow cushion, whatever the case may be. Your body doesn't care. It's having that exact same response.
Wow. Okay. Also, what are the benefits of masturbation?
Yeah, so the biggest benefit is just that it feels good. It's pleasurable, and I don't think we need to justify anything beyond that. But then we need to ask ourselves, well, when do we seek out pleasure? Why do we seek out pleasurable activities? Well, it's part of self-care. We can use it. Um, to relax, to help us unwind at the end of the day, to help us fall asleep. It can be a nice distraction from feelings of discomfort, whether that's emotional discomfort or physical discomfort. So pleasure is going to be the primary benefit. But from an educational and clinical standpoint too, the more that we masturbate, the more that we learn about our bodies and how our bodies respond to touch. And we learn what kind of touch that we like, what kind of touch we don't like, what feels good, what doesn't. And then we can communicate that information to a partner if we desire and have that communication ability. So they know during sex what we like, what we don't like, what feels good, what doesn't. So we can also think of a benefit of masturbation as the more you masturbate, the better sex and more pleasurable sex that you can have with a partner because you know just more about yourself.
Okay. So, are there any disadvantages at all?
I'd say the biggest disadvantage is the stigma and taboo that's attached to masturbation. Clinically speaking, that's what we see as the culprit for quote unquote masturbation problems is like the self-imposed guilt that we have that, am I masturbating too much? This goes against my values, things like that. That's not anything inherently wrong or unhealthy about masturbation. What's wrong is the guilt and shame that's attached to it. And that's due to the stigma and societal taboos attached to it.
Okay, okay. What kind of taboos and stigma is there, doctor? Just
Yeah,
religious taboos? Or?
that's a big one, and that really stems from what is considered like acceptable or permissible types of sexual behavior, and that's usually viewed as partnered sex for the purpose of procreation. And
Mm,
any type of
mm,
sexual behavior that starts deviating from that will have a
um,
certain amount of stigma or taboo attached to it. So that's one culprit, and then you just kind of mix in some of the pseudoscientific like wellness information, just a lot of
okay.
disinformation, misinformation about what is healthy for you. And that's driving a lot of kind of stigma or shame or guilt around masturbation, just a lot of misinformation about health.
Okay, so we are getting there. So, what is
Yeah.
this whole no FAP? How did it start? What is it all about? Any evidence that does it work?
Yeah, so NoFap is an online community for guys who feel that their masturbation and porn use. Now, specifically, it's about like abstaining from porn, and that's the
Mhm.
other thing. Like I made the point of differentiating between orgasm and ejaculation as separate processes. An important distinction too is porn use and masturbation. Usually, they're just mentioned interchangeably. So if somebody is saying that they're abstaining from porn, what they're essentially saying is I'm abstaining from masturbating. So
Mhm.
it's an online community to get to support individuals who think that porn use and or masturbation is a problem in their life in some way and they want to stop. So I would question that first is like, why do you think it's a problem, right? And so that gets into thinking of, is there a stigma attached to it? Do you feel distressed about it? Because how is it impacting your life negatively that you feel like abstinence is your only course of action at this point to live a healthy life. So is there evidence that it's effective? Just anecdotally, and
Okay.
anecdotal evidence isn't actually really evidence because you can't really refute that. You can't say to somebody who has
Mm.
said, yeah, I gave up porn and masturbating a year ago, and since then I have all this energy and I feel great and I'm getting straight A's or I'm getting promoted at work. It's like, okay, that's what you believe. Like I could say the same thing. Like I've eaten 5 blueberries a day for the past year, and since doing that, not 4 blueberries, not 6, but 5 specifically, that has increased my energy, and I got a promotion at work, and it's all because of those 5 blueberries that I consume. So it's really difficult to challenge anecdotal information like that, but to apply that across the board, that yes, everybody can expect these effects if you abstain from porn watching and or masturbating. No, there's no data to support that.
Okay. Okay. So, what is this semen retention?
Semen retention is more within kind of like that pseudoscientific like health beliefs that I was alluding to earlier. And it's just this belief that by not ejaculating, that by holding in your semen, by not masturbating and ejaculating, that somehow is benefiting your body in some way. People say that it gives them more energy, more stamina, whatever the case may be. And again, that's anecdotal. Like if they feel like that's happening to them, like there's nothing I can say that will convince them otherwise. But just know that your ejaculate, the seminal fluid from your prostate and the seminal vesicles, is only there to be ejaculated. It serves no other purpose than to be expelled from your body. So it's not nourishing your body in any way. It's not this magical elixir that's supporting you. And that's the important thing too, why I wanted to get detailed in that first answer, is that what's actually being kind of retained, and what is the function? Are we just interested in retaining the fluid from the prostate and seminal vesicles? What about the sperm cells? If the person has a vasectomy, they're always retaining their sperm cells. They're continuously making sperm. They're just not being ejaculated. Is that beneficial for them in their mind? And also, since ejaculation is separate from orgasm, can you orgasm under this belief of semen retention and the supposed benefits of that, but just hold in your ejaculate, and which you can train your body to do that. It takes a lot of pelvic floor strength to be able to kind of clench off that process, but you can have an orgasm while not actually ejaculating. But usually people think that that's the same process. And so when we talk about semen retention, it is just purely abstaining from masturbating and having an orgasm with or without ejaculating. But I can say equivocally, semen in your body is serving no function. It's just being produced to be expelled. It's like saliva. It's going to be constantly produced, whether you're swallowing it, spitting it out or not.
Because even if they keep it in them, it's going to happen at night. Or
right, yeah. Nocturnal emissions, again, it's just a spinal cord reflex, prolonged. We have, 5 or 6 or so erections at night, typically during REM sleep. And then if that erection is prolonged enough, arousal is sustained enough, you can trigger that orgasmic response, and you're going to have an ejaculation involuntarily at night. And so it's...
The magical elixir is anyway going to come out.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's just what our body does. It just wants to produce it to get it out of our body.
Yeah. So there are some popular myths on masturbation, or tell me if it's a myth. Can you bust it one after the other? Okay, I'll just ask it like a rapid fire. Okay. Does masturbation cause hair fall and acne?
No, not at all.
Okay. Does it reduce testosterone levels?
No, and I'll add a qualifier to that because there's a lot of misunderstandings about testosterone. Testosterone fluctuates and waxes and wanes throughout the day. So even if there is a slight fluctuation pre versus post orgasm, one, it doesn't matter if you're masturbating or having sex, and so it's not a masturbation specific thing. And also, it's not having an overall impact on your testosterone level. So masturbators do not have any different types of testosterone level than non-masturbators.
Okay. Does regularly doing it cause infertility?
No, absolutely. Again, like I said, that your testicles aren't even involved in like ejaculation. It produces sperm, it produces testosterone, but what is actually getting ejaculated it's not coming from the testicles directly. So it's not having any impact on your overall fertility. If you're trying to get pregnant, I would say don't masturbate and ejaculate by yourself right before having penile vaginal intercourse, just so you're ejaculating the most amount in that moment of active sperm cells, but it's not changing your overall fertility.
Okay. Does regular masturbation result in the quality of sperm going down?
No, not at all.
Okay. Does it improve the quality of sperm if you regularly masturbate?
No, I don't think there's any data to support that either, because it's a constant cycle of sperm cells being created, maturing, and storing. And if they're still stored too long in the epididymis, they just die and get reabsorbed into the body. It's a constant cycle. So whether you're masturbating or not, your sperm cells are being created and dying in your body or being ejaculated. It's constant with or without masturbation.
Okay. This was really a common one. People who work out should not masturbate, or what?
No, again, this will be anecdotal. Like if you get really tired after you masturbate, again, because it is a stress reliever, it can be used for relaxation. So if that just kind of decreases your motivation to work out, then like masturbate like whenever you don't want to feel like relaxed, I guess. But no, it's not going to have any impact on like the quality of your workout, because I think that that myth is really tied to how it impacts, how they believe it impacts testosterone levels and muscle mass and gain and stuff. It doesn't impact anything like that.
Right, right. Um, on similar lines, sportsmen should not masturbate for more stamina.
No, there aren't any data to support that either, especially like abstaining from masturbating or any type of sex like the day before, the night before a competition, a match, or a game or anything like that. And again, this is important to think your body doesn't care whether you're masturbating or having sex with a partner. So if you're going to just abstain from masturbating and not sex or not abstain from partnered sex, then like your body is not differentiating between the two.
Right.
But again, like with the workout thing, if you get really tired like after you masturbate, then yeah, for yourself, you may want to decide when you want to engage in behaviors that really make you tired or super relaxed that may impact your performance. But overall, it's not having an impact, because you can think of the opposite is true too, of masturbating right before a competition as a way to satiate sexual desire. So you don't have to like think about that. That's not a distraction. Now you can just solely focus on the sporting event. But again, it's all individual, but there's no data to suggest that it's unequivocally going to impact negatively your sporting or athletic performance.
Wonderful. Is masturbating to porn okay?
So the porn conversation could be a whole separate thing of looking at the ethics of how it's produced. Does it contribute to the further objectification of women? So all of that is kind of like a separate conversation. But to align it more with what we're talking about, no, there's no difference in our bodies whether or not we are masturbating to what's considered pornography, if we're masturbating to like a sex scene in a movie, to a lingerie ad in a magazine, to just closing our eyes and thinking of a fantasy. That doesn't matter. It's still the same stimulus response of arousal and orgasm.
Okay. Right. So, how many times a day or in a week is okay for a person to masturbate? Is there even an acceptable count?
Yeah, so this is like one of the most common questions that sex educators will get. And the answer could either be very, very disappointing because it's kind of a vague answer, or hopefully it's very reassuring and validating and affirming and supporting, because there isn't a number, right? You can masturbate 10 times a day and it's not a problem in your life, whereas somebody else could masturbate once a month. And for them, that creates a lot of distress and guilt because it goes against their values. They're trying not to masturbate at all for whatever reason. So masturbating just once in a month is very negatively impactful for their life. But if somebody doesn't have those kind of restrictions placed on them, then masturbating daily, a couple of times a day, isn't going to be problematic. There's nothing physically that is going to be a problem with the number. And one way to think of this is let's say somebody is masturbating like 5 times, or like even like let's get really extreme, like 10 times a day, right? Which is going to be way more than most people are masturbating. But if it just takes them 5 minutes to masturbate each time, that's less than an hour that they're spending on this one activity. And then we have to compare that with how long are we spending on Instagram every day? How long are we spending on Netflix? I'm sure it's a lot more than an hour. If you have an iPhone, you get that screen report at the end of the week saying, oh, you've been on your phone an average of like 5 to 6 hours a day. That's way more than you're masturbating. So it's really about how is this impacting you? Like, are you just stressed because you're masturbating? If so, that's more of like a values conflict, that you think masturbating is wrong or unhealthy in some way, and so you feel bad when you do it. Or how is it interfering with your life in some way too? And even if it is interfering with your life, that doesn't necessarily mean that the masturbation is inherently unhealthy per se. So when I was doing clinical work, a good example of this was somebody who got caught masturbating at work. And we would view that as like, wow, if you felt that compelled to masturbate at work to the point where you actually got caught, is this like a masturbation addiction, a sex addiction, a porn addiction kind of thing? Because now you're doing it in inappropriate places. But what was interesting with this person was that he was doing it at work because he wasn't allowed, so to speak, to do it at home because it was forbidden in his relationship. So his work environment was in his mind, his safer outlet or a safer environment to masturbate compared to the risks of getting caught masturbating at home. So it wasn't like he was addicted to masturbating. It was more of just, it wasn't a masturbation problem. It was a relationship problem. It's like, well, how can you figure out how to do this healthily within your relationship in the privacy of your own home, so you don't feel compelled to do this in inappropriate places like at work?
Wow. Okay. Last question. Okay, I think you've just dealt with it. Can someone get addicted to masturbation? And when do you think someone needs a sex therapist?
Sure. So with the whole addiction thing, it certainly doesn't operate in the same way as we think of like substance use disorders of like becoming addicted to like stimulants or opioids or anything like that. Um, so there aren't data to support that it's addictive in those same ways. And so typically what people are experiencing when they show up to sexual health clinics saying that they're a sex addict is that that is a self-imposed label. And the research that's been coming out in the past couple of years that kind of can help explain, well, why are these individuals believing that they're a sex addict where other individuals who are actually engaging in higher frequency of masturbation, porn use, or sexual behavior with a partner aren't coming into clinics thinking that they're sex addicts. And the reason is this concept known as moral incongruence, and I've kind of alluded to it a couple of times in this conversation. And that's when our sexual behaviors do not align with our sexual values. So if you have a sexual value, usually tied to like religious beliefs, or maybe just sometimes myths about sexuality, that say masturbation is wrong, or it's a sin, or it's harmful or unhealthy in some way, but you're doing it anyways, that creates a lot of distress, and you're going to think you're addicted to it because you're trying to stop because you want to stop the sin, so to speak, but you can't because it's a sexual desire. Um, and so you have this conflict between your values and your behaviors, and that is what's leading people to think that they are addicted. And so treatment for that wouldn't be trying to like double down on trying to abstain. It's accepting that part of being human, of having sexual desires and appropriate sexual outlets for that, and what healthier sexual outlet for that than masturbating by yourself in the privacy of your own home. You can't get much more healthy of a sexual behavior than that, and to accept that that is a part of you. And now the work then is less about of a sexual problem and more about a religious problem, because usually, at least within the United States, it's usually kind of factored in with Christianity beliefs, fundamental Christianity beliefs about masturbation and the sinful nature of it. And so it's more of a religious problem, and rectifying that my behavior doesn't really match up with my religious values, and what am I going to do with that? And again, that's not really a sex problem, that's more a religious problem.
Okay.
And so looking for a sex therapist, I would encourage people, if they do find themselves really distressed and guilt-ridden by their masturbation, finding a sex therapist that is affirming to masturbation, that doesn't think it's inherently unhealthy and buys into some of these pseudoscientific health beliefs about it. And just kind of know that, if this conversation did not alleviate that guilt by kind of debunking a lot of myths and saying that masturbation is perfectly healthy to be engaging in, if that wasn't enough, then education is obviously not kind of the remedy for the distress, the deep-seated kind of distress that you're seeking or feeling. And so seeking out a sex therapist who would be affirming and to explore this conflict a little bit more for you would be beneficial.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Doctor. I think that will help a lot of my audience.
Good.
Would you mind taking a couple of questions, or can we conclude?
Sure. Yeah, I can take some questions.
Okay, I'll just switch on the comments. Yeah. Okay, everybody, 400 plus people watching. Do you have any questions to Dr. Eric Sprankle? Okay, doctor. So there's a question in my question box. How long would it take for the sperm cycle from creating, maturing, and dying?
Yeah, so it's a little over 2 months, I think like 74 days or so, but just know that it's constant. So it's not like you ejaculate your sperm cells and then you're infertile for like 2.5 months or 10 weeks or whatever. That's not the case. It's constantly, it's like a production line. There are sperm cells and billions of sperm cells literally in each active stage of production, maturation, and storage. And so you're never like running out. You may, if you've masturbated 5 times in one day, you may stop ejaculating in that day because, you're ejaculating faster than your prostate and seminal vesicles can keep up, but just wait 24 hours and you'll have a new batch of seminal fluid and mature sperm cells waiting to be ejaculated.
Cool. Um, there's a lot of questions on how do I stop it. So I think since you already dealt with it, let's not go there.
I will say though,
Um,
just to kind of reverse that, just to kind of offer the inverse, because that's a very common question that people come into therapy of like, how do I stop? What would a better question, or maybe my question, not necessarily better, but my opinion is better. Asking yourself, how can I do this without guilt? Right? How can I accept masturbating? How can I do this in a healthy way? What does healthy masturbation look like for me? As opposed to just approaching, I need to get this out of my life. How do I stop? Approach it like, how can I do this healthily?
okay, it's a better way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have already dealt with this, no? What's the difference between ejaculation and orgasm? Yes. Who is the best person to talk about this? A sex therapist.
Right. Sex
Um,
educator, sex therapist. Yeah.
I heard someone telling that if someone masturbates too much, it affects the nervous system. Is that true? Mhm.
No, I mean, the nervous system is like everything, so no, it doesn't
Okay,
impact. You hear that a lot with like clitoral stimulation with vibrators, that it's going to like
okay.
change the
Damage the
nerve
nerves.
endings, yeah, damage the clitoris in a
Yeah.
neurological way, and no, that's all myths. Those are scare
Okay,
tactics.
doctor, to be very honest, I really thought it's women's masturbation that's misunderstood and
Hmm.
that's yet to be learned, and that's kind of, a big mystery and all of that. But I really didn't think or imagine that men have all these questions about masturbation themselves. I really thought men had figured it out. Seriously, that's what I thought. Okay,
No,
just few
yeah,
more questions.
unfortunately it hasn't. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Tell me. Unfortunately.
No, yeah. Unfortunately, that's not true. We don't have it all figured out.
Mm,
There are gender differences, obviously, and women do experience that extra layer of sexism that goes in with
mm,
sexuality and what's considered stigmatized or taboo. There's certainly different
mm.
experiences with women that are additional that men don't experience just because of their gender. But in terms of masturbation in and of itself, yeah, it's kind of like across the board, all genders experience some level of stigma or misinformation in some way.
Okay. Is there any documents or literature that we can go check out to learn more about masturbation? That's
Yeah,
someone's question.
yeah, this is difficult because a lot of times the questions that are being asked haven't been studied thoroughly just because it's
Mm,
so like it's not even worth like a medical researcher's time to explore what happens if you don't ejaculate for 5 days. What happens to the semen? Does it seep into other parts of your body and starts nourishing your heart? And it's like that's one that those questions aren't even like you're not going to get grant funding to do that. You're going to get like probably fired from universities from going down this very bizarre research line of inquiry. But what I would say is like if you have a question, you can start with Google, but really make
mhm,
sure that, or whatever search engine you're using, just make sure that you're clicking on a link that is reputable. So look for what are the health authority sites in your country. So like in the United States, looking at things like the CDC's website, the Mayo Clinic's website, Harvard Health, World Health Organization for a little bit more global. Look for those types of sites providing information about masturbation as opposed to some random message board where it's just a bunch of anecdotal experiences, like I was mentioning
mm,
earlier. Because
mm,
that's you
mm.
can't argue with anecdotes because that's their
Yeah.
personal experience, but anecdotes aren't data that apply to everybody.
Okay. Just few more questions. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, will there be a problem in future if a teen starts masturbation at the age of 18 itself?
No, the age of onset with masturbation doesn't really matter one way or the other. Um, No, we all kind of discover ourselves in different ways. And that's one thing to kind of think of too, of how we think of masturbation. We typically think of it very goal oriented, driven by sexual desire for the purpose of orgasm and or ejaculation. But masturbation in a more of a broad sense is just self-stimulation. And we self-stimulate going back in utero. I mean, there's documentation of living fetuses rubbing their genitals. And again, it's not like a fetus is like got their feet planted against the uterine wall and just like really going to town on masturbating to themselves because they're so horny in utero. It's just because it's stimulus response. They found a part of their body that feels good to touch, and they're going to touch it, just like sucking their thumbs. It's not driven by sexual desire, the same motivations that later teens or adults use to masturbate. So that's one way to think of it. We all discover this self-stimulation, the self-pleasure that comes from touching ourselves at different stages in our lives. And there's no right or wrong of when that emerges, or when it becomes more of a focal point where we're intentionally doing it. It's everyone's own little sexual development.
Okay. There's a question. Is there something circumcised men need to think of while masturbating?
While masturbating? No. No, I would just say that you have a little bit more tissue, obviously, with the foreskin than circumcised individuals do. So just kind of pay attention to what feels good, what doesn't, like retracting the foreskin to provide direct stimulation on the glands of the penis, which is the head of the penis that the foreskin covers. Because again, this is all just you learning about your body and what you like, what you don't like. And then if you want, you can communicate that information to a partner. So they know what kind of stimulation you like and you don't like, but there's nothing that you have to like watch out for. It's just, exploring what feels good, what doesn't.
Okay. There's a lot of questions, though. It's going to be a vast topic. Just something short that you can talk about premature ejaculation, because a lot of people have been asking.
Yeah. So premature ejaculation is one of the most common sexual dysfunctions, right up there with like low sexual desire and erectile difficulties. So premature is essentially just subjective. It's like premature to whom, to by what standards. It's just before we want to. And so there's a lot of myths of like how long we should last. We never worry about premature ejaculation during masturbation because we want to usually ejaculate as quickly as possible. And so sometimes we train our bodies to ejaculate and have an orgasm very, very quickly. And so when we are with a partner, our body's used to that quick kind of stimulation, from stimulus to response of ejaculation and orgasm. But that's actually, ironically too, that even though masturbation can kind of train us to be quicker with ejaculation, it can also train us to prolong ejaculation if that's a desired goal too. Because if somebody comes into treatment for premature ejaculation for a sex therapist, one of the most common interventions is known as the stop-start technique. And that's essentially just masturbating to the point where you think you're ejaculating and then stopping, letting arousal decrease a little bit and then resuming, and repeating that process of slowly gaining control over the timing of your ejaculation, slowly gaining insight into the subtle changes in your body as it increases in arousal. And then that can be applied to partnered sex, so you can monitor how your body's responding and maybe slow down a little bit if you're thinking you're going to ejaculate too soon.
Right. Just two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
One, is masturbating after marriage not okay?
From a health psychological perspective, it's perfectly fine to masturbate pre-marriage, after marriage, after a divorce, regardless of your relationship status. Masturbation is perfectly healthy for you. The conflict can arise if your partner does not want you to masturbate, and that's where you get conflicts. Kind of what I was mentioning with that guy who was masturbating at work. That was frowned upon in his relationship for a variety of reasons that can be frowned upon. So he was now seeking outlets, in inappropriate environments to get this need met. But from a health perspective, it's perfectly healthy for you. And I would encourage to speak with your partner, regardless of your relationship status, about what is the role of masturbation, what are we comfortable with. This is our own bodies. We can do this in the privacy of our own homes, and we can just have a conversation of like, how does this actually impact the quality of our relationship, including even the sexual relationship? Because a lot of times we believe that it's going to have a negative impact just based on a lot of myths that we have, or sometimes just a lot of insecurities that we have about our partner having like their own sex life, even if it's just by themselves.
Right. Last question. This has
Mm-hmm.
come around. So I had 58 questions, and more than 30 times a person has asked, why do you feel tired after masturbating?
Yeah, because it is a stress reliever. It is, think of that orgasmic release, right? So the analogy even though obviously it's not the same physiologically, but a good analogy just to kind of think of more metaphorically is a sneeze, right? You have this buildup of like sinus pressure and then the sneeze and it feels like a relief, right? So you're like, ah, you kind of come down a little bit. So an orgasm, again, with or without ejaculation, it doesn't matter the gender, an orgasm, the muscle contractions are triggered by the same type of arousal response that it may create this sensation of just relaxation and calmness afterwards. And and that's why we use it as intentionally as a way to kind of, calm down, relax, unwind, maybe right before bed. And so that's where you get into the anecdotes of like, oh, don't have an orgasm or ejaculate if you're training or working out or you're an athlete, because it's just going to make you tired all the time. And it's like, well, it does for some people. Other people, it serves as a nice kind of release, and then they can focus on other things more clearly. So it is just a way to relax. But one thing with that too is that we can also condition ourselves to get sleepy from masturbating. And this is just kind of like a behaviorism kind of response, kind of like Pavlov's dog, right, with the salivating to the sound of the bell. That we often masturbate like right before bed. And so now our body is pairing masturbating and then going to sleep afterwards. And so over time, we masturbate even during the day. Our body's like, oh, it must be bedtime. I'm getting tired now, because usually these two things are paired.
Right, right. Okay. Just one look at the question box and it's like
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming.
Yeah.
I've never got so many questions for any life. Okay, doctor, can you comment something about blue balls?
Yeah, so blue balls is just a slang term. I've seen it used for a couple of different things. One, it's usually when somebody has prolonged arousal. So let's say that they are engaged in sexual behavior and that sexual behavior stops before orgasm. They say that their testicles are aching or they hurt in some way because they didn't ejaculate. Um, what what that is actually what they're feeling, if they aren't just being dramatic and wanting the sex to continue in a somewhat manipulative and coercive kind of way, if they are sensing actually like a dull ache in their testes, that's just because the pool of blood that is sitting in your genitals is creating pressure, and it can put pressure on your testes. And so what happens with orgasm, the function of orgasm is to reverse that blood flow, and so it starts pumping some of the blood out of the genitals, and so it can relieve that pressure. But arousal is going to go down without sexual stimulation. So if you just wait a little bit, your arousal is going to go down naturally, and it's going to alleviate that pressure. And this is really important to understand, because a lot of times people do say like, oh, I have blue balls and they really hurt, and so we need to continue sex. And it can be very manipulative and coercive to continue sexual behavior if it's stopped by the partner for whatever reason. So if you're really concerned and distressed about your own blue balls because sex stopped, just go to the bathroom or another room and masturbate and take care of it yourself, and then problem solved.
Thank you so much.